You know that person who never posts anything. Maybe it's your friend, maybe it's you. While everyone else is documenting their vacation in real time, they're just on vacation. No stories, no perfectly framed sunset, no caption about grateful. And from the outside, it might look like they're missing out. But there's a real possibility they've figured out something the rest of us are still chasing. The less you feel the need to prove your life online, the more real your life actually feels. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you posted on social media? Now here's the more interesting question. When was the last time you almost posted and didn't? That pause right there, that tiny hesitation between opening your camera app and hitting share, that's the moment that tells the truth. Because somewhere in that split second, your brain runs a silent audit. Will people like this? Does this make me look successful enough, happy enough, interesting enough? Is this worthy of approval from 247 followers I haven't spoken to since college? There's a sociologist named Irving Goffman who wrote about how we all perform different roles depending on who's watching. He argued that we wear social masks to shape how others perceive us. But social media didn't invent that instinct. It just amplified it. It turned everyday impression management into a 24/7 stage with a permanent audience. Now the performance isn't just for a room of 20 people. It's for hundreds, sometimes thousands, and it never really goes away. A bad caption isn't just awkward. It's archived. It can be screenshotted, revisited, judged years later. So when someone chooses not to post, they're not necessarily disengaged. They might just be opting out of the performance entirely. Research shows that roughly 30 to 40% of social media users are what researchers call lurkers. That word sounds suspicious, almost creepy, like someone hiding in the shadows. But studies published in Frontiers in Psychology suggest something much more human. When the pressure to post combines with fear of judgment and constant comparison, it creates emotional fatigue. People start to feel drained, anxious, even slightly exposed, and instead of participating, they quietly observe. In other words, your brain isn't being antisocial, it's protecting you. Think about how comparison works online. You're scrolling on a random Tuesday afternoon. Someone announces a promotion. Someone else posts an engagement ring. Another friend is buying a house. You know, rationally, that you're seeing a highlight reel. You know there's context missing, but your nervous system doesn't care. It registers the difference. They have more than me. They're further than me. They look happier than me. That low-grade comparison adds up. Self-determination theory, developed by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, suggests that humans thrive when they feel autonomy, competence, and genuine connection without external pressure. Social media often undermines that autonomy. It subtly nudges you to measure yourself in likes, comments, shares. It turns self-expression into a scorecard. So the people who rarely post aren't necessarily shy or disconnected. They might simply be guarding their sense of control. They're saying, my worth doesn't need to fluctuate based on an algorithm. And here's the thing. When you see these people in real life, they're not usually isolated or miserable. If anything, they seem grounded, present, sometimes even calmer than the rest of us. They're living their experiences instead of editing them. They're watching the sunset instead of debating which filter makes it look most cinematic. There's also a psychological trap most people don't notice. Even if you never post, simply scrolling can trigger automatic comparison. Studies show that passive browsing increases feelings of envy and decreases overall life satisfaction. Your brain interprets curated content as real-life data. It doesn't automatically tag it as staged, it just absorbs it. People who rarely post often limit this exposure intentionally, not because they're fragile, but because they recognize the game. Why enter a competition where everyone else controls the camera angle, the lighting, and the narrative? Then there's an interesting split in how people consume content. Some avoid Instagram or TikTok entirely, but will spend hours on YouTube. They'll watch a long-form documentary, a 3-hour video essay, or a deep-dive podcast. Why? Because YouTube often doesn't demand reciprocal performance. You're not expected to share your own life in exchange for access. You're not under subtle pressure to maintain a personal brand. It's engagement without exposure. You can learn, laugh, think, and log off without wondering why you haven't posted in 3 months. They found the loophole. They get the information and entertainment without the social scoreboard. Another pattern shows up in research on relationships. People who post less frequently often report smaller social circles, but deeper ones. Instead of 1,000 casual connections, they invest in 5 real ones. And data consistently shows that quality of relationships predicts happiness far more than quantity. 10 honest conversations beat 1,000 emoji reactions. Depth sustains you in ways visibility never can. And here's where it gets subtle. Not posting doesn't mean not paying attention. In fact, many people who stay quiet online are highly observant. They notice shifts in tone, changes in frequency, the difference between a genuine update and a carefully constructed narrative. They're not checked out. They're just not broadcasting. They prefer understanding over performance, reflection over reaction. Psychologists differentiate between public self-consciousness and private self-consciousness. Public self-consciousness focuses on how others perceive you. Private self-consciousness focuses on your internal values, thoughts, and emotional states. People who rarely post tend to lean toward the private side. Instead of asking, "How will this look?" they ask, "How does this feel?" That shift creates space to develop an identity that isn't constantly shaped by feedback loops. When you're not managing an audience, you have more mental bandwidth for introspection, for recalibrating your goals, for deciding who you actually want to be when no one is watching. That creates a sense of self that stands independent of applause. Choosing not to post isn't the same as hiding. It isn't necessarily fear. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's strength. It's the decision that your private experiences have value without being consumed. It's recognizing that some moments lose their magic when they're converted into content. That the conversation flows more naturally when you're not mentally drafting a caption. That the accomplishment feels more satisfying when it belongs only to you. Studies suggest that people who post less often report more stable moods. They're less vulnerable to the emotional swings caused by fluctuating engagement. They're not riding the high of a viral post or the low of an underperforming one. They're operating outside that volatility. Here's the paradox. Social media promises connection, expression, and community, but often it delivers pressure, comparison, and performance. The traits that lead someone to step back, self-reflection, autonomy, internal security are the same traits social media claims to nurture, except those traits are stronger when built offline. Silence has become unusual. Not posting is treated as suspicious. In a culture where constant sharing is normalized, privacy can look like rebellion. But the people who opt out aren't rejecting connection. They're rejecting the format. They're saying, "I'll connect face to face. I'll call you. I'll meet you for coffee. I just don't need an audience." So here's the question worth sitting with. What if the people who don't post aren't behind? What if they're ahead? What if choosing privacy over visibility, depth over followers, presence over performance isn't antisocial at all? What if it's self-respect? At the end of life, very few people regret not uploading more photos, but many regret not being fully present in the moments they lived. The quiet ones aren't hiding in the dark. They're just living in a space where cameras don't dictate the experience. And maybe that space feels more honest than any feed ever could. So maybe the real question isn't why some people don't post. Maybe it's why we assume they should. In a world that constantly tells you to document, announce, and perform, choosing not to can feel almost rebellious. But sometimes silence isn't withdrawal. It's intention. It's deciding that not every moment needs to be witnessed to be meaningful. That not every achievement needs applause to be real. That not every emotion needs an audience to be valid. If you're someone who rarely posts, maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe you're not behind. Maybe you're simply protecting something valuable. Your peace, your focus, your sense of self. And if this made you pause for a second and reflect on your own relationship with social media, that pause matters. If you found value in this conversation, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology behind the everyday behaviors we rarely question. We'll keep exploring what's real, even when the world prefers the performance.